it's
Of course.
just to introduce Yael Oppenheim. She's coming from Haifi Universe. We are having a joint project about combining surveys and new technologies. And in this context, she will introduce one tool. She might be biased because she was working for that company. But anyway, I think it's very interesting.
Yes, thank you, Asya. Okay, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. So yes, I'm gonna talk today about social media analytics and how we can use the specific software, but also other software that does social media analytics for academic research and for research in general. It's going to be a brief introduction and with some examples, so feel free to ask questions during the talk, and after all, I'll also show you how we use the software and how you can create queries and etc. Okay, so we were speaking in the last few days about whether social media analytics will replace surveys. So just to be clear, I think the short answer is no. Okay, I don't think that that surveys are over with, but I do think that there are many things that we can do with new technologies, with new digital tools that can help validate some of the data that is harder to get by using surveys. Okay, so why use social media analysis? So the short and most obvious answer is because we can, because data is being gathered all the time. Everything we are doing is collected and stored. And also the easiest way to explain the advantages of social media analysis is to talk about disadvantages of other competing research methods. So while this is not the most polite thing to do, we are seeking for the truth, right, as researchers. So I can talk a little bit about how the disadvantages of other methods, how we can use social media analysis to overcome some of these disadvantages. So for one thing, when we do interviews and focus groups and surveys, it takes a lot of time to gather the data and to process it. While we use social media analytics or other forms of digital tools, you get the data right away. It's almost always available, and it's collected on a constant basis. Another problem that we have with surveys, interviews, and focus groups is, of course, the bias that is related to what people say that they remember or think that they remember, but it's normally biased because people usually tend to be socially biased, and there is the thing of social desirability, right? That means that we not always report the truth, but what we think perhaps the interviewer is interested in hearing, or what is the right thing to say or the right answer to give. Another thing is regarding the sample, right? We always have the problem of having too small or a small scale of sample, even if we have several samples. Another issue is the excessive focus on structured data, which is one of the things that is most hard to cope with in social media analytics. But if we ask, in interviews, in focus groups, we ask questions, right? If we didn't ask certain question, we will not get any answers. But the data will be defined by the questions that we will ask. Another problem with surveys, is the limited coverage. Of course, we normally, if it's, for example, interviews or experiments, so we use students most of the time, right? And data is biased in many forms, and of course there is also the high cost, because it takes time and it takes a lot of normally it costs a lot to get to process all the data. So both time and money is something that is part of the main disadvantages of existing research methods. And when you see this reminds you of something. So this is when you speak about focus groups, right? So you take about 7-8 people and you try to get them to give you answers until they do. So you do whatever you need to do in order to get those answers. And in contrary, with social media analysis, you get what we call qualitative data in quantities. And the beauty here is that you have the data available all the time, 24/7. People are supplying their thoughts and their opinions freely, without a researcher needs to ask anything. It's unsolicited, it's unbudgeted, and comments are just available for you. Okay, so a few examples to how we can leverage social listening, which is another term for social media analytics. There are several terms and it changes all the time. So a few ways that we can leverage data for insights. Okay, so this is an example. Research that was done to 2014. This article was published in Journal of Communication, and the purpose of this project, it was a big project. One of the main purposes was to understand whether using fear in commercial advertising affected people who smoked and caused them to stop quitting. Did the fear have any effect on their behavior? So one of the things they did, they used this is just one imagery, but they used many pictures like that, and then they went to Twitter and they wanted to know how fearful people felt as a result of this campaign, and whether it had any effect on their behavior. So what do you think they found when they went to Twitter? You don't have any guesses. So actually, they did find that fear is more appealing, and people are, the volume of the discussions around this project was very high. People were very content with the results. But given the fact that we are speaking about researchers, academic researchers, and not marketers, so they were humble enough to really test the data, and they realized that people did talk about the fact that it's alarming. So it had a certain effect, but they didn't report that they quit smoking as a result of the nature of this campaign. So it's one thing to find out that people are talking about the campaign or talking about a certain issue, and they feel that it affects them, but it's a totally different thing to say that it actually had any effect on their behavior. Okay, a few examples regarding car sharing and car buying in the United States. So this is another feature that we can, when we use social media analytics, we can see where geographically people are speaking about different terms. So here, what you can see is a map of the United States, and the countries in blue are those that are mentioning or talking about car buying conversation, and those in the light, orange or brown, countries that are talking about ride sharing. So what you can see here is that states without a comprehensive public transit system, or that are located in more rural areas, rely more on cars and less on Uber and Lyft, for example. This is another example to see how, now it's time to use the pointer. Our ride sharing here is biting off the discourse of public transportation and car buying. So ride sharing conversation, specifically about Lyft and Uber, has grown from 10% to nearly 50% of share of voice since 2013. That momentum is cutting into car buying and public transit conversation volume. So this is another thing that we can learn by just implementing several terms and see how popular they are, or how prominent they are in the discourse. Another thing that we can do is do what we call emotion analysis. So there are several software that allows you to understand people's emotion, whether it's fear or joy or anger, Of course, this is done by a specific algorithm, a commercial algorithm. And here, regarding self-driving cars, you can see that the dominant emotion is fear. And like this, for example, you see the tweet underneath. Tesla has a self-driving car, emoji, fearful emoji. The robot apocalypse is upon us. And if you want to understand what's behind this graph, those emotions, so you can also do theme analysis and understand what actually people are talking about. So we can see that people are talking about the fear of hacker concerns, that people will hack their cars and cause accidents or things like that. People are talking about doomsday. People are talking about technology, the technology aspect, technology revolution, the innovation. People are talking about self-driving cars as a solution to problems with traffic, and of course about the economic implications. So you can go deeper according to what you're interested in, and learn more about the public discourse around whatever is the research subject. Okay, another example also regarding cars. So BMW wanted to know, this is based on the market research, wanted to know whether people, or what kind of innovations people are appreciating about BMW. So they thought maybe it's the new transmission system, maybe it's hybrid technology, maybe it's the heads-up display. But they actually found out that what people were most excited about was the laser headlights. So this has nothing to do with sophisticated technology. It's just completely a feature that they didn't expect to be to encourage this enthusiasm. Okay, so another popular term, as we mentioned when we talk about social media analytics, is sentiment analysis. So in general, when you do sentiment analysis, you want to understand if the discourse is, or which part of the discourse is positive, negative, or neutral. This is also done. Some software has been doing this, trying to automate the process to a different level of success. In Buzzilla, we do it manually. That means that we take a sample of the discourse, and there are annotators who actually read the comments and divide them into positive, negative, and neutral. So there are different methods to do that, and it is still a very complex issue. Even today, so there's a lot of advancement in this area, but it's far from being perfect. So a few examples. So many years ago, 2009, there was a crisis for Domino's Pizza. Don't know if you remember, but there was this viral YouTube video in which one of Domino's employees involved some body parts. He put a finger in his nose, and then he made the pizza, put it in the oven, and it was filmed and broadcast. Not live, but it was broadcast on YouTube, and it became viral immediately. And that was even before Domino's Pizza had a Facebook page, so there was not a lot they could do. Certainly they couldn't take off the video. But here what you see on this graph was created by a company called Sysomos, which is also one of the biggest social media monitoring companies. So you can see the words that people used when they spoke about Domino's Pizza in the days after the event. So you can see popular words were video, were prank, were YouTube. I think there was nose somewhere here, and discussed. And so, employee. So this gives you salami. Yeah. So this gives you when you use this feature, this word cloud, even though it's not a cloud, but so it gives you an idea what people are talking about, what people are interested in. It can be, it can be regarded to a specific to a specific event, but not necessarily. And when they analyze the sentiment, so prior to the event, you can see that generally the sentiment surrounding Domino's Pizza was 40% positive and only about 10% negative. And of course, after the event, you see the change. It was much more negative than positive. Okay, do you recognize this picture by any chance? So, what we can see, I'm not sure that you can maybe read it, it's a little bit blurred. So on the orange sweatshirt, it says mangrove jungle and survival expert. And here it says coolest monkey in the jungle. So this is a commercial by H&M they came up with it, you know how many years ago? You want to guess? Maybe? So it's just 2018, a year ago. So not even long ago. And immediately, of course, the social media was on fire and people were calling to boycott H&M, and there was a lot of discussion. All of they were blamed for being racist, of course. And if you read those tweets, which you probably can't from where you're sitting, but I can just read to you one of them here. Oops. H&M, really, black kid is a monkey, and the white kid is a survival expert. You racist scumbags. Take that weak ass apology and shove it. So you can have during the few days after the ad was published, you can see all of those tweets. And when you're using social media analytics, you can see what is the volume of the discourse, how many people are mentioning the word racist in relation to H&M. Another example, same year, 2018, just a year ago, Nivea came up with this commercial that says it's a deodorant commercial, and it says the slogan is "White is supremacy," and it was under the hashtag invisible. So the reactions came quite fast again, and Nivea was blamed, of course, as being racist again. One of the headlines were PR nightmare, Nivea, white is purity ad campaign embraced by white supremacy groups. So probably not the best thing to have when you're this big brand. Okay. Another example, this you probably all recognize. It's from United Airlines flight 3411 when there was an overbooking, and they decided to drag this poor passenger out of the aircraft with no good reason, and he was a doctor, and they mistreated him, obviously. And then they said they had to reaccommodate the passengers, so that was the reason. This is the word that they were using to describe this event. And then they got this tweet says, "Hey United, is this how you reaccommodate your passengers?" And then here you can see how the volume of conversation around United spiked just the day after the event. Actually, just a few hours. I mean, this is the day of the event. It's the 10th. Just in a few hours, Twitter was on fire, and then a day after, and also several days after, it took a while until people stopped talking about it. And there was another effect, which of course it affected also the stock of United. And one person said, United Airlines stock is being reaccommodated. Okay, so now I think it's a good time maybe to show you how it actually works, how you use Buzzilla to measure different terms and appearances. So I thought this could be a good place to start, just to give you a quick example how we actually do it. So I will not go too much into details because this is just an introductory, and later on I will go further into details and more hands-on instruction. But what we have here, so this is the Mozilla Interface. Just a few words about Buzzilla. It's an Israeli company founded in 2008. It's the biggest company in Israel to do social media analytics, and it works with all companies in Israel and several companies abroad. And what this is a software. Buzzilla is providing both a software that it sells to people, users, to other companies, or also to academia, so they can perform research on their own, and they also a research company for itself, so they also do research. And what this software basically does, it's a social media search engine, meaning that you can insert terms that you define very similar to the way you use Google search. You need to define the terms according to the Boolean method, and then you can see, the system, the software, the engine, it scans, it monitors social media in general and the web. So that means that it crawls the web, including public data on Facebook, on Twitter, on news websites, on forums, on blogs, on Instagram. And I hope I didn't forget any of arena. So this data is collected and it is stored, it is indexed, and it is available for 2 years. So that means that each time we search a term, we can see the volume and the results going back 2 years from the same day that we do the query or the research. Different companies provide different amount of historical data. There are companies that will allow you to gather data from Twitter dating from 2007. Okay, so just to show you how it works. So we can create a query. I already created a query. We can also create queries and save them for further use. So I just build a few, just so you see what we can get using. So what I'm actually doing, I defined a query that is called Melania, and just to Melania, and just to so you understand how I did it. So this is like the interface of the query. I can define the terms, and here you see it's right here, and I can also add similar synonyms or similar words if I don't want to receive results about each and every mention of Melania, because there are other Melanias which are not Melania Trump, of course. So I need to narrow my search. So this is why I'm adding the word Trump. So it's going to be Melania and either Trump or First Lady, or Flotus, which is also used mainly on Twitter to describe Melania Trump. And there are also other fields that I can use, but maybe go into that later. Okay, so next thing I would do after I have my query ready is to decide on the time frame. So let's see how many mentions did Melania receive since 2007 until today. Okay, so now I have the query here in the search field, and I have the time frame, and this is actually what we need to see for now. And this is next step, and then I hit this button, and then I wait for a few seconds, and then this is what we get. Okay, so here you can see in all those green bars, you see that display is daily. That means each line is a day. So this is actually the volume, the number of conversations that included the name Melania, how we defined it in the query, at least once. So you can see how the discourse behaved throughout time, and you can see there was this spike on 2017. Anyone has an idea what was the reason for the spike? Okay, so luckily we can test that, but we can go into each of those bars and see what stands behind them. But what we can also see here under the graph of under the volume graph, we can see Buzzilla enables us to see the origin of the conversation. So each one of those forums and social networks, each one of those is a conversation that was collected by the crawler. So here, when you see forums, that means that a conversation was in one of the forums. And so these are actually, these icons are for arenas. So this one was in social networks, meaning probably Facebook. And you can also see whether it was on some kind of article or whether it was on Twitter. And we can also see like 80 discussions per page. Now each one of those, you can actually press it and you will see the original item. For example, here it's on Facebook and it's on this person's page. And let's take another example of articles. So this one was published here. So once you press it, you can see the original article. Okay, never mind. Okay, now another thing that we can do, we can also export all this data to Excel, so we have it all organized. I can also show you how the Excel looks. Probably do it in the second part. So if we want to know what is the reason for the spike, we can just go to one of these bars and press it, click it, and then we can choose if we want to see further discussions or site segmentation. So let's try to see discussions to understand what was the reason for this spike. Okay, so you can see there were, during this day, only this day, there were, you can see 1,762 conversations that included the term Melania at least once. Important thing to say that each conversation on Buzzilla is it is an entire thread. That means that it includes from the first comment until the last one. So even if the name Melania was mentioned 10 times, it is still counted as one because it is one conversation. So it doesn't count mention. It counts appearances of at least one appearance of the term per conversation. What we can also see here, we can sort the data in all kinds of ways. So if we want to see what was the actual reason for this spike, we can go and see, okay, what comments, what article or conversation received the highest amount of comments. This can give us a good idea for what was the reason for this spike. Okay, so now things are becoming more clear. So we can see that this conversation, that's headline is "Here's why Melania Trump wore a black dress to meet the Pope." This was a conversation that had 500 replies. So that was quite an issue. And if you remember, another thing that happened that day is that Melania refused to hold Trump's hand. Remember that? So that was also a reason for the large interest. Okay, so let's try another query. So I prepared this query for Slovenia, and we are still working at the same time frame. Okay, so what do you think of that? We have several spikes. I mean, there is roughly, I don't know, about average of, I guess, around 100 conversations per day. It's important to say, what I didn't say in the beginning, that all the results are in English, and the results that you receive depend on the coverage of the software. I mean, if Buzzilla is leading Israeli company, so obviously it covers the entire discourse and websites and forums and social media platforms in Israel. And in addition, it also has a lot of coverage of websites in North America and partially also in Europe. But it doesn't cover the entire world. So if each time a new country or a new customer wants to use the software, that means that the first thing they need to do is to feed the software with sources. So if, for example, we want here in Slovenia, if you want to use this software or other software, you have to create this list of websites and Facebook pages and forums that you want to include in the scanning, in the crawling. And it's, the moment we gather all this data and we insert it into the system, it starts crawling and collecting the data, which is available 2 years back. But I mean, it won't take 2 years if it didn't have the data to begin with. So it's starting the same day that you feed it with the new list of websites. So any idea what was the reason for those two spikes here? If you had to guess. Okay, would you like to see? Because I can tell you, because I already checked. Okay, so the first one, perhaps you will not be surprised, but it was the football game versus London, versus England. So this was a reason for one spike. Many people spoke about this match for some reason, which you probably know better than I. And the second one was also sports related. Let's see if we can see more discussions. So on the highest spike that included about more than 1,500 conversations. I'm talking about the entire 2-3 days here on around March 12th. So here discussions were about the Olympics and the hockey game. And wait, how do you see that? Okay. So sometimes you just have to go through several conversations until you see the theme. Another way you can do that. Yeah, okay. There was a hockey somewhere around. Let's go to here. Okay. Yeah, many conversations here. So another way to understand the reason for the spike. Sometimes spikes are caused because there are many topics that are on the news in the same time period, and it creates a fake spike. So it's not really something specific, but several events. Another thing we can do is to do the way I showed you with the same thing that I showed you with Domino's Pizza, that you can see a sort of a word cloud to see which word which words people used when they spoke about these conversations. So another thing that we can do comparisons between different terms. So, for example, if we want to compare, let's compare. I prepared a query about Madonna and another one about Beyonce. So we can build 2 queries or 6 queries or how many queries we want to, and compare the data, the volume of data. So if I do that, sometimes you find interesting things. Okay. So what we can learn from this graph? So basically, we can see. Okay, so the green line is Madonna, the red one is Beyonce, and we can see that there were, during the past 2 years, there were 96,000, around 97,000 conversations surrounding Madonna, and 148,000 conversations surrounding Beyonce. So I guess that means she's more popular on the specific websites that are being scanned in the system. What we can also see, of course, are the spikes. So I can already tell you that the reason you see Madonna had a spike here and here. So this one was a cause of her appearance in the Eurovision that took place in Israel, as you know. And this one was as a result of her appearance in the Emmy Awards. And Beyonce also had several spikes, but you can see generally the discourse behave quite normally, let's say. So this is another feature that we can use when we want to compare terms. And of course we can go to each one of these days, and we can go as to expand or to limit our time frame however we want. Another interesting thing that we can do is what we call site segmentation. So if we want to see where people were mentioning Madonna or Slovenia or whatever theme, whatever subject we want to research, so we can do that. We can go to site segmentation and import our query. And okay, let's take millennia for example. Let's take the past 3 months, and let's see what we get. So this will actually tell us where is this term mentioned, where are people talking or referring to Melania. So we can see that 52% of the conversations happen in social media, only 4% happen on Twitter, but we should remember that Twitter, I mean, it's not, Buzzilla or also other software not necessarily cover the entire fire hose of Twitter. So this should be taken with a grain of salt. And almost 40% of the conversations are a result of mentioning in articles. And we can go further and see which news websites mention her. If we go there, we can see what kind of websites are the most popular one. Okay, so this is not surprising. Why? We can see that 6% of the conversations, including Melania, appeared in the Daily Mail in the UK. And here you can see other news websites, Yahoo and Breitbart, which is a right-wing news outlet. Should be interesting to see what they had to say about her. So this is about site segmentation. So the main features, the most interesting ones, let's say, in this software are the charter volume, the search, when we can create queries in quite a sophisticated way, and we can really learn about how people think and talk about different things, things that we cannot not always understand from other methods of research, because people speak more freely when they don't think that somebody is listening, even though more people are aware of the fact that there are companies like that who monitor the web. But of course, we are only talking about public discourse on Facebook pages and on forums and websites and Instagram and Twitter, which is all public. Okay, so and the other interesting feature is the site segmentations, because this allows you to understand also what kind of people are talking about this specific term. For example, one of the research that we did, we wanted to understand what kind of people, who is talking about buying a car in Israel. I mean, when you want to buy a car, you want to consult, so we figured, okay, we will see where people are talking about cars, and we can identify the population. So if you had to guess, who do you think are the type of people that are talking or consulting about buying a car? Men, women, age, like your best guess?
Men, probably.
At what age?
$30 to $40.
Yes. Okay, wrong answer.
Okay.
So
Women.
No, it's not that surprising. We found that most people that are talking about buying cars, we found them on this forum called FXP, which we mentioned also yesterday. It's the biggest forum in Israel for youth. Actually, youngsters are going there to consult with their friends, and what we actually saw that the people that are consulting the friends about buying a car are men in the ages around 19 to 22, 3, and they recommend their fathers what car to buy to the family. So if you are, if you want to do, to think about strategy when you want to sell a car, perhaps they should address the companies, perhaps like BMW and others, address other audience than the one that they are approaching now. Okay, so this was about Buzzilla, and I wanted to do a little summary and to say a few more words about big data. Okay. Okay, so just to sum up the advantages of using the benefits of social media analysis. So the best thing, what I like most about this form of research is that you can discover the unknowns. So you don't have to ask anything, you don't have to think of all the questions in advance. You just have to go out there and see what people are talking about, and they will tell you the answers without you having to ask the questions, which is a great way to uncover insights that you never knew existed. And I see that, all the time. Like you have a certain thing that you have certain assumptions about a certain topic, and then you find out that, you may be right or wrong, but you can also uncover many other things that you would never think about. Uncover honest opinions, which again, unlike asking people directly, which can affect them in different ways. When you go to social media analytics, you can receive responses that are unsolicited, and they are likely to be less biased and more sincere. At least in not in all cases, but in many cases, let's say. Okay, you can listen to everything and anything, which is a bit maybe a bit wide. It's not exactly correct, but you do have a lot of let's say data pool that you can reach, access to publicly shared posts around countless topics. you get immediate feedback, which is also something that it's one of the biggest disadvantages of performing surveys and focus groups. You have to do several focus groups until you actually get data that you can work with. It takes time and it takes a lot of processing. Not to mention if you want to use annotators, it also takes a lot of time and to do content analysis this way. And here, at least if you want to get specific numbers or to understand the volume of conversation or to understand where people are talking about specific topics, these sort of tools give you this immediate feedback, and you can also use it to create surveys. And before you create survey and decide your questions, you can see what people are already speaking about, and it can oftentimes help you create better questions or different questions that what you would have written if you didn't have the access to this kind of data. So we started with asking whether social media analysis will replace surveys. So actually, the truth is, what I believe is that that all those tools, digital tools, can actually we can benefit from all of them, and we can actually use them to validate results from other studies like surveys, focus groups, NTC, and vice versa. You can use what you find on digital tools to further and deepen your understanding by asking people why are you thinking this or that. And just a few words about big data. So I like this sentence by observation by Dan Ariely. He says that big data is like teenage sex. Everyone talks about it, nobody really knows how to do it. Everyone thinks everyone else is doing it, so everyone claims they are doing it too. So yeah, big data is a buzzword for the past couple of years, but everybody thinks about it differently, and I tried to look for some data about big data and academia. So I found some interesting findings. I think that we spoke about some of them yesterday as well. So there was this one article talking about the problem of access, that you have those amazing software and digital tools that mainly used by marketers and by commercial companies for research, for market research, but for academia it's very hard to gain access to those tools because they are usually very expensive. So this is what this article is talking about, which is interesting to read. And the next thing, I mean, what it actually led people to do is to use Twitter, which has an open API, at least for now. So it's easier, the data is more available. So this is the reason you see more research that are using Twitter. Okay. Another thing that I found is this white paper about who is doing computational social science. There are some trends, interesting trends that we can see. So they did a survey. They couldn't have done this by using social media analytics, probably, because nobody, I guess not enough people are talking about it to be able to use this if we try to search, if people are talking about, in academia, talking about this subject, I'm not sure we would have found a lot of discussions around that. But what you can see, the survey was, people were asked the amount of responses, research in the last 5 years that has involved big data. So what you can see that 200 people out of 3,000 said that all my research was based on big data. Most of my research was based on big data, and some of it. So at least most of the people said that some of their research was based on big data. Another interesting graph here shows the disciplines of respondents who have been involved in big data research. So you can see social statistics and research methods, used it the most, and afterwards economics. And linguistics are somewhere in the middle. Sociology is just after. Okay, so this is it for now. If you have any questions or things that you would like to go further into, I'd be happy to take questions and to do some more examples if you want to see.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure.
I have one question.
Yes.
Questions. You told me that you need to type websites you want to monitor with this Buzzilla. And also that
If you want to use new,
if you want to include certain block, you need to type it on. If you want to monitor certain block, you need to type
there are two kinds of things that we do technically. And I'm not doing these parts in the system. It's done by people who manage the system, the software, like the architects. But there are two kinds of way. First, there is what you call discovery. The system knows how to find sources by itself. You need to feed it some sources, and then it knows how to find other sources. So if you feed it with, BBC and CNN and other or any kind of websites in a specific country, the systems it has an algorithm that knows to search for other, let's say, prominent sources of data. And in addition, if you want to make this process easier and faster, you can create a list of websites, of forums, of sources that are relevant to your country or to your industry, and then the system will start crawling. But Buzzilla is, again, it's an Israeli company, and most of its clients are in Israel. So it covers the, I wouldn't say entire, but most of the discourse in Israel. But companies that are like American companies, you will find that they monitor most of the conversation in North America and in Europe. But many times, if you want to, for example, learn about discourse in China, it will be very difficult. Or if you use other software, for example, Dutch software, you will not be able to find much of the discourse about that happening in the States or in other countries. So it is still very it's still very geography limited. But again, it's a limitation that you can overcome, because you can create new sources and enlarge the coverage. So that's not a problem. It's just something that you need to do if you want to create more.
So it's possible to start at scratch and then build your.
Yeah, it's exactly what we do what they do on a regular basis. For example, if somebody approaches them from, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we want to understand the discourse about anti-Semitism. Okay, and we want to understand the discourse in Germany. So you start monitoring websites in German until you get enough. You don't have to monitor each and every website, because normally it's enough to have just enough number of sources to understand public opinion.
But on Facebook, if I understood you properly, you need to be explicit. You need to type the website to be monitored on Facebook, because Facebook is too big.
No, I think it works more or less the same. The system knows how to recognize large pages with a lot of traffic, a lot of followers. But again, it needs to have something to start with. So it's a good thing to provide the system with a list of several popular mainstream pages where people are discussing. Normally, it's the news pages that are most popular, and then the system knows how to find similar pages.
But on Facebook, you are not monitoring individual pages, just
we can monitor any kind of page as long as it's defined as a page and not as a group or personal pages. Personal profiles are not monitored at all, even if they are defined as public. They're still not monitored.
But on Twitter?
So Twitter, it's another story because Facebook and Instagram, they have API. So once you have you have permission to take, like it's like the Guardian. It's like most news websites. They have API and you get access to it, and so you can monitor most of the, let's say, the data. But with Twitter, Twitter has a public API, and it's open for the public. So anyone that knows how to work with Python can extract data from Twitter, but it is getting harder and more expensive. Twitter has this several what you call different size of pipes. So you have the fire hose, which gives you access to the entire conversations on Twitter, the entire data, which is really expensive. It got only more and more expensive. So today, certainly for academia, it's very, very hard to gain access. And then they have the garden hose, which is 5%. And then they have what they call the spritz, which is like 1% of the discussions. But many times you don't have to have the entire conversation in order to do the research. I mean, even if you have only 1% out of Twitter, which is enormous, you can have millions of data points, which can be enough for many types of research. But Buzzilla is not one of the companies that provide access to Twitter because they're not buying access. So the data that we receive on Twitter is very limited, unless you want to add this. You want to add payment, and then you can buy from Twitter, of course, the data. That is definitely an option. Other companies where Twitter is more popular. Obviously, for them, it will be more important to include, to provide access, because if it's popular, then it's important. In Israel, most people still using or prefer to use Facebook and Instagram, but Twitter is not very popular. So there's no really point of having this data, not in large quantities.
Okay, any other question at this point?
Okay, good. Thank you so much.